Welcome to the Religiously Offensive Podcast.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for the Religiously Offensive Podcast. This is episode 1.
Wow.
This is the first time we've recorded ourselves talking into these mics, even though it feels like we literally talk hours every day about random stuff.
Yeah.
And we're finally recording it because we won't typically look at the camera, but since it's the first time and we're so glad you're here, you're probably watching Mom right now, thinking if you're the only one, you are the only one. I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much.
Hey,
I probably got a few haters tuning in.
Oh yeah, a few haters. Love you haters. Thanks for tuning in.
tabs.
Shout out.
Yeah,
shout
absolutely.
Take the
So
best.
we got Luke Doyle over here, former pro basketball player, found faith later in life.
That is correct.
This is Gabby Lambright. She is easily the best Halo player in our office. And
Easily?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
And she currently leans more toward believing in God, believing in something, but isn't quite sure. She's on the journey. Justin grew up in the church, went to ministry school, currently doesn't know up from down. And I'm JJ.
Facts.
You probably watched the intro. I hope you watched the introduction. If you did, you kind of know me a little bit. And that's it. So talking about doing this podcast, again, like I mentioned, you know, we have these conversations in the office all the time about all these controversial subjects that, you know, we typically don't talk about in church, don't talk about anywhere else, don't really have a chance to talk about anywhere else, except in private, you know, because you're sitting there like, all right, well, I know this is stuff people think about, but, you know, there's really no outlet, no place to talk about it. And you know, I wanted to kind of just give a brief story that I've told you guys before. I was in Ace Hardware, which is really close to this office, standing in line, and there's a couple of old guys in front of me. One of them starts talking about, I mean, he's got frustrated politically about something, you know, he's just talking like, I'm gonna start an organization called White Lives Matter, and we're gonna loot and riot and, you know, all this stuff. And it's just like, and he just kept talking, rambling, right? Yeah. Like, you know, the old guys typically do. And then he goes in and says, you know, the problem is these people don't know the Lord. And I'm just like, what? I'm like, okay, so much wrong right now, right? And so it's just this. There's such a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect. You know, it seems like we're all speaking English, but we're talking different languages, right? And the point of this podcast is to really help people bridge the gap, you know, because there's believers on all sides of the spectrum. There's extremes, and they just miss each other, right? They get disconnected. They don't understand. And part of this podcast is to really just help understand. Like, we want to bring in different perspectives, different ideas, you know, things that may be absurd that we don't necessarily believe, but we could have guests in that, you know, just think, just have these crazy ideas. And it's just, you know, one of those things, like for me especially, it's if it doesn't conflict with like one of the two biggest commands, like, you know, specifically for Christianity, you know, in the Bible, Jesus talks about, you know, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and then love your neighbor as yourself. He culminates everything into those two commands.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of times Christians and religious people go beyond that, and they just think, you know, okay, well, I think that it's important what we believe about evolution, what we believe about, you know, this and that. And it's just like, these are not things that we were commanded to have a solid stance on. Like, we can't claim authority over those things. And so it's okay to have these thoughts and ideas about them. And, you know, somehow in the evolution of Christianity in the last 100 years or so, we've really, you know, just taken these stances that don't need to be taken. And it's just further separated us from, you know, science community and stuff. So that's related to science specifically. We'll talk about a lot of things. We'll talk about politics, you know, we'll talk about current events, and different things like that. But, you know, again, we're just a bunch of coworkers, like to have fun together. Yeah, and hopefully you guys will have fun with us. So I don't know if anyone had any other thoughts about kind of what this podcast kind of means to them, and, you know, what their hopes are.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of my specific journey, I grew up knowing a lot about the scriptures, a lot about Bible, a lot about Christianity, and didn't question a lot. And then in recent years, just start to look around just in the world and seeing just inconsistency. And so, I want to be careful. I'm not projecting the flaws of man onto God, but the challenge that I was beginning to have is, I think about verses like Jeremiah, 29:13. It's like, you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart. And I had to just get real with myself and just acknowledge that, like, I don't think I ever really did my seeking phase. Like, I think I just bought the goods, bought what was being sold to me. Yeah. And I never really did the work. So, because I never really sought with everything, I never really found him. And then it was always like, there was always like God, and then I always wanted a foot in on both sides of the fence kind of a thing. I was never able to just be 100% all in. And I think a lot for myself personally is because, I understand why, we have other verses like train a child in the way he should go and he won't depart from it, right? So, of course, a parent that has a strong belief system wants their kids to grow up the same way. But it's almost like if we don't...
I feel like there's something lost in that verse because it's like kids are growing up being told what to believe. It doesn't work.
Right.
You can't, you can teach kids how to think. That's like what I try to do with my son. It's like, hey, bud, it's just, you just have to understand that you're going to believe what you believe and you need to find it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I can't teach you what to believe because it proves itself time and again where, you have people growing up and all of a sudden they can't reconcile why they believe what they do. And then it clicks. It's just like, oh, it's just because what my parents believed. And just they grew up in a different time. So that doesn't apply to me.
Right.
Because they had no belief as it grew within the context of their journey. They just didn't have that.
Train your child in the way that they should go, as in, I feel like that could be misconstrued because it's like if you train them to have thoughts for themselves, right, then they would be raised to do so. But people train them in the way that they think instead, and that's I think that's why we're kind of doing this pod.
I think it was it Michael Todd, pastor
Squad
out of
pod.
There you go.
There it is.
You
Had
got
to
it
say
in.
it.
That's
Had
fine.
to say
All right.
Throw it
One
in
and
there.
only time.
But there's a pastor, I think he's out of Oklahoma, Mike Todd. He kind of blew up, but I remember he talked on that verse a little bit, and we always use it in a sense of like, raise them in the church, and it's the idea is to keep them close, in the belief system, all that stuff, because ultimately, if you're doing that, you believe it's best for the child. There's obviously good intentions at work, but yeah, he brought in the concept of like, it's what you said. It's essentially like these children are becoming products of their environment, right? So it's like you can take them to church every Sunday and try to drill into their heads that like we're Christians, this is what we believe. But if throughout the week they're at home watching mom and dad fight, they're watching like poor conflict resolution, they're watching pride win every fight, they're seeing no one like being willing to just really have humility and just suck it up and apologize first, even if they're not in the wrong.
Yeah.
Like they're not, I feel like a lot of people aren't really seeing biblical principles played out in their like Monday through Saturday lives.
Right.
And so they have this internal conflict of like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to believe. I'm also getting this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the hard part for someone like me, like my parents were pastors, right? So it was there was this optics like part of it, right? Where it was very like, your job and your job security is essentially like, we got to stay squeaky clean, which is kind of an inconvenient truth. But I mean, we see what happens when scandal starts to hit, spiritual leaders. It typically doesn't end well. It unravels pretty quickly. And so the hard part is I understand why you want to keep a super tight, like just grip on all of that, but not allowing, like you were talking about, like a child to have the freedom to really seek and to question. Then, I don't know about everyone's experience, but for me, it just like those questions were there. And I was clearly just based on the actions of myself growing up. I was looking for something. I was looking for truth. I was looking for something more. Like on some level, I had to get real with myself and just be like, the church thing is just not satisfying me because I'm going all over the place to find, right? I was looking for love in all the wrong place, whatever you want to call it. But by not giving that child really the freedom to really just seek and ask any questions, and for me, it just led me into this place of hiding, right? So I got really good at masks. I got really good at lying. I got really good at hiding, play the game, You know, I could be on stage, no problem. You know, I just got comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. Is I didn't feel the same pressure you did growing up. I grew up. My family started attending church when I was 8. They weren't pastors by any means, right? So I feel like pastors' kids have that pressure. It's just so funny because it's like you're related to someone who is, a religious, person who's responsible for teaching and leading, a group of believers or whatever, and there's a lot of expectation on you. It feels like those are always the kids that were the craziest.
Yeah.
Just because of that,
Oh, yeah.
exactly what you said.
Bro, PK retreat
PKs.
was
Yeah.
madness,
PKs.
bro.
Oh my gosh.
It was like the place that was known. Like, some of the pranks.
Oh, I
like
do.
it was like
I'm
some
aware.
things I can't even say yet. Like, we'll get there, but
Oh yeah,
PKs were the worst. Pastor's kids, sorry. That's
yeah,
Christianese.
yeah. The dick made out of chairs. Let's just say it.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Let's just say
It's
it.
incredible.
Shout out Greg
Love
Ford.
it. This is gonna be
Sorry,
offensive
brother.
to people.
You almost had to send me home that year.
So good.
I put you in a hard spot. That was tough.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, my upbringing was a little different. Yeah. So I didn't really ask those questions. I didn't think much about it because I kind of like found it with my family,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it wasn't just something that they had been teaching. Like they were learning as I was. So it
Mhm.
wasn't as bad for me.
Mm.
But just growing up I would say in a type of church where there was a lot of legalism. Slowly it's kind of you start to get that way where it's just like they say like, okay, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, and good Christians don't do these things,
Mm.
right? And call it fruit of this, fruit of your life or whatever it is, of Christ's impact on your life. But it just wasn't. It just wasn't something that you couldn't step out of line, or there were consequences, real bad consequences. Grace was really a thing that. It's almost like no one had heard of at that point, right? The only one who can give you grace is God. Like people don't give you grace, kind of thing, right?
Right.
It's just like, and it's crazy because now you start to understand. You ask these questions. It's like, what I mean, why are we like this? Why and we get to this point where it's just like the legalism is so intense, where you have these pastors that are in high places and they fall because you think they're untouchable, and at the same time, if we recognize that people are imperfect and everything like that, not that there won't be physical consequences for actions, but we just have to understand that grace is important, for us
Mm-hmm.
as well as if God was the example of giving grace, we have to follow that.
Yeah.
So,
For sure.
but yeah, we're kind of going off on a trail, but
On that, though, I think it's important to recognize that, like, Luke, you brought this up many times. It's like when we get to these weird, tough topics where it's like humans are butting heads, it's like it's funny to me how little emphasis there is to just say like, hey, let's put down the swords and let's go like actually find like heaven's solution to this problem or something like that, right? Like with the punishment aspect of all this stuff, with dealing with just issues, right? It's like, well, there's a way that like God handled these things through the scriptures, and it's like, it feels like that's like secondary. It's just like, oh man, we got to cover our tracks. Like this could derail the ministry. This
Right.
could, affect
The human
giving.
reflex of
It's like the
response.
natural things you're thinking of when an organization could potentially crumble.
Right.
yeah,
And it's like, well, dang, as a spiritual leader, a group of spiritual leaders, like a staff of a church, it's like, where is like the legitimate trust and faith in God that like if something was brought to the surface, it's ultimately meant to like prune, to refine. It's like there's often just this immediate pushback of like, oh, we got to do like damage control, send out the PR team,
Right.
So it'd be interesting. I want to get Gabby's perspective because she you didn't grow up in church, right?
No. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad's side of the family were all Jehovah's Witnesses. So, and my stepdad's side of the family were Catholic. So it's like I've seen all the different perspectives, but I've never like dove deep into any of them.
Did you ever go out and canvass neighborhoods?
Absolutely not.
What was that like? Jehovah's Witnesses.
buddy
Well,
system.
Do you have any like
Oh
memories?
my gosh.
Well, yeah. I mean,
buddy?
my memory it's just like any other church. I mean, I didn't experience any of those things that you guys imagine when you hear the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like I've never, I mean, I know that they did that stuff, but yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really known what to believe because I'm always trying to understand everyone's perspective. And it's really easy for me to understand everyone's perspective. So like, that makes sense. Oh, well, that also makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, why do all these things make sense? How's there one thing?
That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. Of all the religions, why is your God the best, kind of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think, Jehovah's Witness, I don't
know much about that.
I don't know everything about
I don't
their
really
creed,
either.
but,
Yeah, I don't.
yeah.
But I know, like,
Should that be a
Is
when
that
I'm
different?
around
Yeah,
everyone,
look it up.
it's-
How is it different than like Mormons?
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're different.
yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Go ahead. What were you
The
saying?
Jehovah's Witness official website.
Nice.
wow.
Well, I figured they'd have
Do
one.
they have like a synopsis type deal?
Yeah, that's what I need.
That'd be tough if they come to your door and they don't have a website.
Well, I know they have like a thing once a year that's like a really big deal to go with, because like I remember vividly, like when I got out of, because I was pretty much forced to go with my grandma. She's deep into it. And I just remember one year, probably like 10, 11, 12, something like that. I was
You
just
just
like,
said got out. I'm like, got out. Oh,
Got
it's
out.
like one of those.
the cult.
Like you should write a book.
Yeah. No, but I just remember I didn't want to go to this. I was like, I don't want to go to this event. And it was a very big deal that I didn't want to go at the time.
Yeah.
She eventually got over it, because I'm her granddaughter. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of just made that my mom, I think it was my mom. She was like, it's okay if you don't want to do this. Like if you don't want to go to church, that's fine. And I mean, I'm blessed that I have that type of,
Yeah, for
mom.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Some people are like you guys said, are just forced to,
Yeah,
this is what it is.
Right.
yeah. It's one. I mean, it's just human instinct. It's like right with my kid. Like we're still trying to figure out how to be parents, right? And he's almost 11. But it's just one of those things where I feel like if you force him, he's just gonna resist even harder.
For sure.
In the other direction.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
It's almost like at this point, Gabby would be more open to God almost more than Justin, just because of,
It's interesting.
you know what I mean?
Right.
I
It wasn't
mean,
forced on
and I'm
me,
not
yeah.
trying to speak that for you, but
Right.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like in a way, you could take an outside perspective and like almost assume that, just because of
Mm.
of how a lot of like kids are raised, in the church and stuff. So, yeah, that's interesting though. So in your reactions, or sorry, not in your reactions, with your interactions with other Christians, and I'm sure you've had that. What's been your biggest takeaways from that? Like as far as how they are, how they live their lives, how they expect other people to live.
I mean, I really don't interact with, you guys,
Okay,
right? But like,
well, that's easy.
which is different though. I mean, from the get go, you guys, obviously I don't know how you guys really feel about my lifestyle.
What's your lifestyle? We haven't covered that yet.
All right. I'm gay, obviously. You mentioned in the intro, you guys are obviously straight white men. So that'd be me.
Yeah, it's tough. We have literally no weaker position right now in this country than being a straight white man. It's like with our powers combined, we can have one opinion.
Yeah.
It's all right. No, it's yeah. So
Well, this whole office
No,
is
in
men,
that-
except for Gabby. It's probably important to.
yeah.
Yeah. Only woman here. Only one. Well, I guess, everyone's for the most part just like super, Christian, goes to church every week. Justin's figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a super Christian.
I don't even know what that means.
You
Just
guys are,
because
okay,
that's a-
super. Okay, I guess that was just my way
Don't
of
say
saying that you guys
Don't-
are
that is
dedicated.
offensive to me.
That's religiously offensive.
Yeah, it's just
You guys are just dedicated, right? You guys go to these small groups. You guys,
I don't go to small groups.
No, I hear
you
what
go
you're
to the
saying.
small
Yeah,
groups.
yeah, yeah.
You're in worship.
I get what you're saying.
Can we just cover what
You're
everyone
gonna make
does
me
here?
throw out one of the words that I'm not allowed to throw out.
Drop it.
We're here.
Just go
No,
Nagasaki.
I
on
hear
it.
what you're saying.
Yeah. So yeah, and I mean, yeah, you're pretty much the best of at everything of anyone in this office.
Okay.
That's also a good
That
point.
sucks, right? It's
don't
just like
know.
I just like my little brother. It's just like, and I've told you guys this, but like I pole vaulted in high school, and then
Oh, I did not know that.
I was 11th place at state.
Is there
So did
videos
so
of
did
this?
How many?
old Corey boy
Out of how many? I
pole
think
vaulted,
that's
didn't he?
important.
Out of 11.
I bet he did.
I need to see.
Yeah, one more
vaulting
thing
is
you guys have
one
in
of the
common.
most
Corey also
impressive
pole
things.
vaulted.
It is actually.
Oh Lord,
You'll
Please.
maybe meet him later.
For
Probably
your
not.
sake.
hopefully not.
That stuff is.
He's gonna
insane
hear
to
this.
me.
He's definitely listening to this, and he's gonna be like, "Those assholes."
He's our one view right now.
Love you, Corey.
We love Corey.
Him and Cody.
We do love Corey.
Sorry.
No, but I was 11th place at state. My
Wow.
brother, who's 5 years younger than me, comes up and wins state.
Oh no.
So it's like
She's like, really?
A classic
I was really proud.
Couldn't let
of
me
my
have this one.
accomplishment. Yeah, right. It's like, what the hell? So and then in here, it's just like we were all like, you play Call of Duty, and we were all
Yeah.
sitting there. I felt like we were fairly, whatever. Even
You guys introduced
playing
me to
field.
Halo.
And then all of a sudden, we're like kind of still all playing down here. Once in a while, Luke, he has a couple games.
I think
And then-
Luke really put the fire under me.
And then Gabby's just like killing it, like every time. It's not even close. So it's now we're all just fighting for second place, and I get nervous about this golf thing. I really do. She's gonna pick up some clubs and just be like killing it, and then we're just gonna be like, well, what is the next thing that we can find to do?
I don't know. I think I can let you guys have. I mean, I'm really into the disc golf, but I'll let you guys have.
I love that she's
Regular
gonna
golf.
let us have it. Like she knows, she's aware. If I did this, y'all would be in trouble.
It's the dedication.
But I'll let
Practice
you
makes
have this
perfect,
one.
baby. Practice
I
makes
feel like
perfect.
I'm gonna go broke playing disc golf because I feel like every time I'm gonna lose something. Like literally the first throw the other day.
Well, maybe
Over
just
the
don't be
fence.
bad.
Oh my gosh.
Take
All
that.
Boom. Skate better, bro.
That's truth.
Brink
All right.
reference.
Anyway, what were we talking about?
This happens often as well.
Yeah, I'm
course,
not
It
sure.
does.
Correct.
It does happen often.
If you haven't picked up, we do a bunch of fun stuff.
Yeah.
Like
That's
we talk
also
about
part
it.
of this podcast.
We
We
play-
also work.
we do work.
We work.
Which
Work hard, play hard.
yeah, we play.
That's it.
Yeah, we went golfing for the first time as an office. I don't know.
Magical.
I just feel like you need some
It was fun.
context. To all
May
that.
or may not have gone for under.
Rumors.
No, we
rumors are
we
spreading.
did for sure.
It's Gab and the Birdie
I didn't.
Boys.
I didn't. I
Gab
just
and the
drove
Birdie
around. I say
Boys.
we did. I was just literally sitting in the golf cart.
No, you're way more than
It
that.
was fantastic.
I'm going to include
It was a
myself
great
in
trip.
that W.
That's funny.
It's great.
Counts.
I think so. But yeah, anyway.
Well, I guess so to kind of go back to what we were talking about, I grew up, like when I got to, here's my experience. My parents never forced anything on me. At least I didn't feel that way. And if you were to ask 8-year-old Luke what his life was like, he would say, I have the greatest life ever. We lived in this nice house. It was like one of those streets in the neighborhood where all the kids played outside.
Right.
Like it was a dream. Our house was the one that had the outdoor fridge. Everyone would come, would get some Sunny D. Like my childhood was the best.
So you're a privileged white male, what you're saying.
I was privileged.
Okay.
Which is, we should dive into that word privileged, but I digress.
I don't think we'll get too far, but continue. Not a lot of sympathy out there.
Yeah,
But-
no, I know. No, we need a different panel for that one.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden one day my mom called me and my sister in a room and told us they were getting a divorce. And so then for the first time, I was like, y'all aren't perfect. I'm looking around like heartbroken. And so it wrecked my life. And come to find out, like my dad had an affair. We don't have to get super deep, but for the first time ever, I realized like, oh, like they're jacked up. Like, and so it was right 7th, 8th grade. And then I went to high school, and high school for me, I don't know if y'all can relate, was a different universe. Like when I got to high school, I made the varsity basketball team, and I found out what varsity cheerleaders look like. Wrecked my life. Like I was just like, this is awesome. My dad was out of the house.
What did
right?
cheerleaders look like where you went to school? Before varsity. You're saying they were just more developed? Is that
They
what
were
you're saying?
older.
I see.
I'm a 15-year. I wish I had a
Just
picture of 15-year-old Luke because you guys would.
I feel like you've
Tackle.
sent one, and
Just your first real life
For some
woman.
reason,
Yeah,
I didn't connect.
right.
I thought you said college, but you said varsity. That
Yeah.
makes more
Yeah.
sense.
Right.
You're right. You're right.
But yeah, so I mean, no dad in the house. He traveled a lot for work at that point, and so I basically was the man of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't listen to my mom. Kind of like set the tone of what this is allowed actually, and you can't tell me otherwise.
you have siblings.
Younger sister, and an older half brother, but he was not really relevant. I shouldn't say that. That's mean. He's not.
He just wasn't
He
around.
wasn't a big part of your
Yeah,
life.
he is relevant, but he's not.
He is
relevant.
not even relevant.
That was harsh.
I
That
see
was
where
harsh.
you were going with it.
Yeah. So,
That's funny. It's like
So
someone talking about their middle sibling. They're not really relevant. There's the oldest, youngest, and there's them.
That's great. No, but yeah, I don't know. There's probably a lot of people that can relate to, like, when you're at that age, nothing else, you don't think much about life. You just, everything is so much about your life, right?
Yeah.
And so.
Some people never grow out of that.
True.
It's all about my life.
Right. And I
Most
never was
people.
challenged. It wasn't until after my parents' divorce where my dad started, like, this whole Jesus thing came about. And I was like, what's happening to him? And
Oh, he brought it into your life.
Yeah, because it was after the divorce where he found this major life change, and he gave all the credit of it to Jesus. And so I'm like, that's new. Like, what's that about?
Yeah.
But I also was like, I kind of like what I'm doing, so
Mhm.
maybe I'll revisit that later. And I feel like that's a lot of people can relate to that, because God can forgive. So maybe he'll forgive me when I'm 50 and I can live 40 years however I want. And that was kind of my mindset as a student and as even a college kid. So,
But you weren't actually doing anything bad.
I think
For the
he
most
was,
Well, like, what were
what is
you
bad?
Like, I mean, what were
worst
you
thing.
doing? What, like, you were still being kind to people. I get that.
That's what he was doing.
But okay, so then, but that's like one of those controversial things. Like, why? Like, that's not. Why is that bad?
I would say I was
It's true.
at the root of who I was as a person. I have been changed. So
Like when you were like what you would consider bad. Like, did you? Because we talked about this, just the whole concept of violating your conscience.
Right.
Like, it's like, did you know you were doing something wrong while you were doing it, or was it just
Like you
like
felt it
you were
was
just
wrong?
figuring it out? You were just because
Or now you're saying now it's wrong because
Looking
of,
back
because of
on
who
it.
you are now and your beliefs now.
like, was there a lot of shame while you were
yeah,
going through that?
yeah, and I don't know why. Here, all right, let's just get down to it.
I think I do.
I have a tattoo. I wish
think
I could
do.
show you. I have a hoodie on. Love my tattoo. But anyways,
You could. You
I
could
had this
just take
moment-
that thing off.
Jesus.
Teaser.
Not supposed to say that.
Take that
And-
thing up. Mm.
Yeah, little boy.
oh, MJ.
Okay.
So
I will not keep doing that. I'm sorry.
you should.
It's,
I'm here
it's
for
too
it.
cheesy.
Dive into that Michael Jackson stuff.
To answer your question, I was 12 years old, and my dad was just freshly like going through this, and he forced me to go on this like church camp, which I've never been a part of. And at that church camp, I had this moment where I was like, and like I felt like, okay, what I know now is I felt the Holy Spirit, and so what that means is I just kind of had an experience where I was like, God's real, and I just knew it without a doubt. And I was 12, and so then high school happened, right? And so I remember that night, like I was like, God, I don't know why, like you've made it so that we should have sex until marriage. We shouldn't have sex until marriage. Like I didn't know much of like the principles behind any of that, but I was talking to God that night, like I'm gonna do my best to honor that. And then high school happened, and then so I remember
So like it
the
literally
night-
says that in the Bible that you're supposed to wait until marriage.
Well, literally it says in other words, but the principle of it is sex is meant to be something enjoyed by two people who've made a covenant with each other. It's really, I love the topic of sex, and I've learned a lot about it because it's affected my life drastically. But it's deeper than that. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
It's challenging because when you go,
It's deeper than
I'm
that.
sorry. Yeah, that's all I was thinking when you said that.
Giggity.
it's a challenging thing because when you look,
I know I said I would stop.
You won't.
when you look at kind of the big overarching kind of theme of the Bible and Scripture, right? You have the Old Testament, you have the New Testament, right? And there's elements where certain things from the Old Testament stopped at the cross, certain things started at the cross, and certain things made their way through, right? And I mean, we could go into specific things; it's not really important. But when you think about like a conversation or a topic like that, right? Sex. It started with God creating Adam and Eve, obviously made them for each other. So it was like we have this example. And then we have God's people, the Israelites, all throughout the Old Testament. All of their leaders were out here chilling with like hundreds of wives and concubines. And they made a distinction, like Solomon had thousands of wives, also the wisest man that ever lived. So that's kind of an interesting corollary. But like he had like tons of wives and tons of concubines. Like it was like in the thousands. And so it's like it's this very interesting thing where it's like this arc of like then Jesus comes back, or no, then Jesus comes, then he fulfills the Old Testament, ushers in this new covenant, right? We get most of our blueprint from there, from the Gospels. But it's like now you're taking a culture where, and we still see it today, right? And it's not like it was specific to the Israelites. It's like people with influence take advantage of other people. And it's like, I've been guilty of this. I'm still guilty of this. Like it's easy when there's relationships that really work out in your favor and you don't have to really invest a lot into them. It's easy to just hold on to those. But it's like, is it wise? No. So ultimately, like, you're not serving yourself. You're not serving that other person. You're hurting each other. But it's just like this weird thing of you get these very rigid rules in terms of like sex is to be had with one other individual for your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why. Like, we get a lot of that because, like, my own story personally, you know, I've slept with a lot of people, and ultimately, like, there is an effect that sticks with you, right? It's like that whole ripping off the Band-Aid. Every time that piece of tape, every time you try to stick it to something, it's just like a little less adhesive, It just doesn't carry. Like, because I remember, you know, those moments losing my virginity, it was like, this is a massive deal. And now it's just not a big deal, right? And so it's interesting because when we approach people, like we talked about this earlier, it's really difficult when people come in who didn't grow up maybe in the church or didn't grow up with, you know, religious parents, and they grew up living a certain way. And then, like, I had a guy when I was at a church, he was playing in the band with us, and he had just gotten involved. They just started coming, and he was a young guy, really talented musician. And at the time, it was like, bro, if you got a good musician, like, I don't care what's going on. You wrangle that dude up, and you get him on stage. Like, we need help, right? And so, but then we were also doing this thing where we're just like, we're trying to bring this guy in, make him feel super loved and involved. And then at the same time, we're just going to him and like, hey, it's not cool that you're living with your girlfriend. Like, da-da-da-da. Like, I never felt at peace. I never personally had the conversation with him because I just never said, I was like, this dude just got here. In his mind, in his life, there's no violation of his conscience, right?
And
like,
now
if
there is.
anything, right, like, we're creating it, right? We're adding an element of shame. It's like, this dude's stuck in a lease with this girl. Like, he can't monetarily, he is financially stuck. But we're saying, like, you're not allowed to do this. But it's like, so we're like offering him some solution, but then we're also saying, like, hey, you're not allowed to do this, da-da-da-da-da. And I understand why, you know, we say these things, but it's funny because, I mean, I put myself in his mind. And he's like, oh, I like tried to commit to this person, sign a lease with this person. If anything, like, I'm trying to like make steps to show that like I am committed, right? And so, you know, where throughout the thousands of years we kind of got, I mean, who knows with the concept of marriage? Like, marriage was a very different thing a couple hundred years ago. Now, I mean, for some people it is a very special like religious spiritual covenant, but culturally, it's become much a different thing.
I think it's just a symptom of a bigger problem, especially in the church or religious community, period. And that is an intolerance, you know, by people who probably grew up Christian, those people that did stick with it and don't know anything else. They just expect anyone who's just introduced to Jesus or the book to all of a sudden just recognize this as their authority as well, instantly, right? And it's just like, well, I grew up this my whole life. Why don't you understand this? It's just like there's an intolerance to their perspective. And so,
That's good.
you know, and that's, you know, it's another just overarching reason why this is important. And it's because, you know, people just need to understand there are other perspectives out there, right? Like, you know, it's just like, yeah, it was just Gabby just said, like, you know, the Bible really says that about sex. And you're just like, well, you ask any Christian that, they're just like, well, of course, that's basic, you know, whatever. But it's just like, there are people that don't know.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
that,
it's like
you know,
I know, right? Because I've heard it.
Yeah.
But
you're
it's like
just
I've never read it.
you
I've never
read
actually read it.
For
Yeah.
sure.
One of the things that
I don't know
I've
what the
learned,
legit words say.
Here's an
People-
interesting thought. Most early Christians were illiterate, and printing presses didn't exist till 1400. So it's like most of Christians throughout all of history didn't have the book.
well, one of the, it's
We'll
funny
get-
'cause
we'll get there.
Yeah,
It's a
you gotta
different
get there.
episode.
But Mike Todd actually talked about this the other day. Someone sent me a video. Like, you can read scripture all you want, but there's something about understanding the principle behind it that can lead to understanding, right? So, like, for me, sex, like, there was the majority of my life, I agree. I'm like, I didn't understand why it was bad. And bad is a weird term because if you are someone that's had sex, you know that it's certainly not bad. It's great. It's a great time.
Yeah.
And anyone who tells you sex
not
is
wrong.
bad they're missing that because obviously it's a
You
big
will
thing.
get pregnant and die.
Yeah, like, but I get the heart behind it. Like it's bad, but so the principle behind it that changed for me was like when, and I have the perspective now of like God let me see things clearly once I came to this point in my life. But like, if God created sex, right, which I believe because Justin mentioned the Adam and Eve thing. He created them. They had the first ever marriage. He is the creator of sex. I've heard it put like, we trust creators with their creation all the time, but with God, we question. What I'm saying is, when you go to Home Depot and you buy a chainsaw, let's just say,
That took a turn.
you
I think that's where
follow
you're going.
you follow the directions
I don't know if I like this.
with how they've created the chainsaw and how to use it properly.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Mhm.
If you don't, you can get hurt or hurt someone else. But all of a sudden, when something like sex is brought up and we don't trust the one who made it and trust why, like the way we should use it, we question it, which is fine. I think it's important to question it. But it leads to a lot of hurt and a lot of baggage that I have experienced, especially on the other side of being married, because now I'm married. I've experienced how powerful sex is because I'm married now. But what I'm saying is the principle of trusting why God's saying save it for marriage is a thing of Him saying, like, trying to protect us from
Yeah.
the
No, and
hurt
I
that
agree.
can happen outside of it.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. And I think part of where I'm at right now in my journey is I've never been more convinced that something created this. 100%. And my whole thought is if there's something as important as the afterlife at stake, like end of the day, like people believe in God, right? But like there's a slight difference in, I don't know, this is maybe a little deeper than we need to go, but it's like a slight difference between like believing something and like knowing something. Like belief requires an element of faith. Knowing is more like evidence driven. And like for me, I think about something as important as like eternity, because I grew up in church. I remember all the analogies. We got a big ass rope with one little red like piece of tape on one end.
Seen that very analogy.
Right? And it's like, this is your life and this is your eternity. Don't F this one up. Like, it's like, and you're just like, and it just, for me, it puts so much fear into like, I can't mess up. But
So
like, I
bad.
have these natural tendencies to like, dude, this is inside me and I want to explore. I want to know why. Like certain people, bro, I think can just, they hear it and they just take it for what it's worth, and they take someone else's word and they don't need to question it. I know a lot of people like that.
No, it's-
I wasn't that person. Like
Yeah.
I had to like go to the other side of the fence and be like, okay, I know you believe that, but I need to know like why.
This is funny, Luke's analogy with the how to use a chainsaw. It's as if it's like, hey, here's the book. Just believe what we tell you about this and how to interpret this instructions. And you're like, but I'm bleeding. And it's like, no. Just trust us.
Mhm.
It's just like, what?
Mhm.
Just doesn't seem to add up. And it's just like, you know, and it's that thing. I mean, people get indoctrinated as you could call it indoctrinated, I guess, even though it sounds cultish. But, you know, as a young person, and then what I was going to say before that tied to something you were talking about was all of a sudden they get out of school, they go to college, right? Where it's kind of their time away from home, right? And you know, this thing happens where you're exposed to a lot of these intellectuals, professors that have all these crazy ideologies and beliefs and things like that. And so then they attach themselves to those things because they had no roots in whatever they were taught as a kid, you know, because they were just taught to believe it. And then all of a sudden they hear these compelling arguments, right? So it's just like one of these things where, you know, I feel like, and I'm hoping that, you know, this could be something that like college kids listen to and just understand that it's just like, yeah, we know that you're hearing a lot of different things right now in this point in your life, but it doesn't, you may have been grown up as a Christian, or you may be exposed to other Christians on campus or something like that. But it's at the same time, it's like, you know, just because you heard one side of the story and one way to believe doesn't mean that you can't have these beliefs and then also have these beliefs about other things. Like, and it's the whole faith science thing too, where I just feel like, yeah, it's just like stuff that you know, stuff that you can observe, right? And then there's faith, which falls into the philosophy category, right? And so it's just like even Einstein said that, you know, faith and science, they're parallel. They can't even intersect. But we make them intersect all the time. We create conflict where there doesn't need to be. And it's this conflict creation, there's this stuff that we're just like making up and just saying, hey, you know, we need to fight on this issue. It's instrumental to faith, right? And you're just like, is it really? I mean, is that the hill we're gonna die on today? You know, like aliens, like that's a big one, right? I had heard, you know, someone basically through someone else who had said that, you know, if we discovered aliens, they'd question everything. And it's just like, why? Like what? I mean, why? I mean, the Bible is specific to our existence here. Like it doesn't mean God didn't do it again. He didn't do it, you know, another like a lot of stuff could have happened in Genesis in those, you know, first couple days or however it reads out, right? And so, you know, you talk about that and it's just like, yeah, just we choose to die on these hills that are just not important. And you know, I know it's just kind of trying to bring us back to that path.
Well, no, it's what something that has always stuck with me. It's like, because we turn it into like an intellectual thing. It's like, oh, I need to study the book more. I need to have a better understanding of it. And the reality is, like, dude, there are people that are so much smarter than me and all of us
that know more of the
that
Bible,
have devoted their lives to studying this thing, and they don't agree on a lot of the topics. And that's why it's like, dude, end of the day, even when we get into this stuff with specifically Christianity, it's like, dude, if Jesus didn't address it in the Gospels, like, what are we doing? Wasting our time, like, arguing over things. It's like, there's nothing wrong with
the Jewish
having
rabbis,
interest and wanting, you know, having an interest in space or the concept of maybe alien. It's like, okay, cool, maybe. Like, one of my big words lately has just been, like, perhaps. It's just like, people always say things and you're like, perhaps.
Perhaps.
Maybe. And, like, you don't know that. Like, you believe that, and you know a lot of people that believe that.
Yeah.
But, like, that's why for me it got back to, if it's something as important as an afterlife, like, and you can go to the good place or the bad place, you've now just created the biggest and greatest existential crisis that any human will ever have to deal with, right? And so when I think about that, it's like, okay, so then my job is to find truth if I want to go to the good place, because they made the bad place look pretty freaking bad if you read the scriptures. Yeah. It's like ripping off of nails and gnashing of teeth and constant torture and lake of fire. Like, it's bad. And so I'm just like, if it's this big and it's this important, and the whole thing is to point us back to Jesus, and it's all just about intimate relationship, it's like, I can't think about all of that and say, like, you have to question that and wrestle with that, because it's like, to not be confident in, to me, like, that's, I feel like it's been a lot of my life.
Practice in that.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a lot of my life.
The things we choose to wrestle about now are absurd.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the important things like interpretation of a text that could affect your life in a big way, it's just like, we choose not to. I mean, the Jewish rabbis always argued about the meaning of the Torah. Always. They were always debating, right? But
Bro, top 5 pet peeve when I'm, like, hearing a sermon, and it's funny because I used to love it. They'd be like, you know, breaking down this verse, and they're just like, now this word in the original Hebrew could actually better be translated as da 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 da. And I'm just like, at first,
Hebrew words have like
that.
5 different meanings.
Wait,
Each
why-
word
why
has
is that
like
a
so
pet
many
peeve?
meanings.
Well, no, I used to love that because it was like, I don't know, like maybe
Enlightening.
I viewed it as like, oh, that makes you seem like way, like, I'm really good at this. I dove into the original text, like, you know.
No, they
makes you
Googled
seem super versed.
Hebrew word
Exactly.
For sure.
Or
Whatever.
they probably heard another person say it and they just like
Yeah.
wrote it down. But it's like, it was just funny to me because I'm just like, if there's a better translation for this word, why is that not the translation? Like, it's just such a, to me, it's just so interesting. It just seems like there's so much, like, it could be interpreted this way, or it's a better interpretation is interpreted that way.
Well, one of the biggest controversial things we're going to talk about on here is going to be about biblical interpretation. Is the Bible perfect? And what does perfect mean? Is it the word, like the inspired word of God, right? Like, it's just like, okay, you know, I mean, just to think that, you know, however many hundreds of years or thousands of years over the time, you know, the whole work of the Bible was written, all the translations, all the word of mouth that went into, you know, transcribing all of this, and all the people that could have agreed to whatever, and the fact that humans just have basic temptation, greed, ambition, like all these bad things that are kind of natural, or natural inclinations to human behavior, and you put it through that lens, Like, you telling me the Bible is perfect word for word?
Mm.
Like, that's BS. I don't agree with that. But there are people who are just like, would listen to this and tell me I'm going to hell for saying that.
Yeah, no, that was how I was raised. It was the Bible is a perfect, inerrant word of God. And part of that, though, is you dive into philosophy. It's like the moment that one thing may or may not be true, it jeopardizes, like, the whole thing. You get into that fallacy territory where it's like it has to be perfect, because if it's not, then now we pick and choose. It's like, I like this, I don't like this. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people who it's like that whale actually swallowed Jonah. And some people are just like, oh, no, that's just an allegory because Jesus taught in parables and stories.
But
I
either
know
way,
people,
who the hell cares?
exactly.
Doesn't
but I
matter.
know people who would have been like,
Because
I believe he swallowed Jonah. And if the Bible would have said that Jonah swallowed the whale, I'd believe that too. And I'm like, that's a little wild.
That's the thing. Like, you could argue the message is perfect. It's a perfect message from whatever. You can say that. And that's way more accurate than just saying the text is perfect, right? Like, the message and the text, like, people conflate those. It's not the same thing.
This
Yeah,
will
that's a good point.
definitely need to be a podcast.
Yeah, we'll have to do a
it
little
will
more
be.
research for this
Well,
one.
just do it on the fly. By the way, for those of you who are watching, maybe we have a few more watchers now.
It's still just
further
Corey.
into this.
Probably
It's still just it's Corey and my mom. We're gonna pretty much make these unedited for the most part. We're gonna try to keep them to an hour, so we got a little time left, but just making you aware.
Wait, I'd like to circle back.
We're gonna circle back now.
Circle back, Luke.
Back to sex.
That was really good timing.
Perfect.
You're getting better.
He's getting
I'm
better.
getting so good at
Wow.
this.
Fantastic.
So, and because I guess I'm passionate about this because I've experienced it in a lot of different ways. But
Wow.
well, biblically and unbiblically.
Can you
is what
go
I
into
mean by
each way?
that. That's
I
what
like
I
where
mean.
he has that. That was awesome.
Can
Yeah.
you expound on
But-
that?
Could you list those out?
Yeah.
Need a spreadsheet.
Yeah, that'll be a longer podcast than we need. But I'm saying, like, sex is supposed to be this intimate, right, like, experience with another person. And I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but there's, like, I've experienced that with someone who's not my wife, and it's brought harm to me because if you're vulnerable and intimate outside of a commitment to someone that's like lifelong, it could lead to heartbreak and hurt and even like things like disease and even like, whatever. But what I've experienced is through like marriage, you create in your marriage an atmosphere where like you can be all guard down, and in that place we can enjoy and experience and navigate what sex is together, because no matter what comes from that, we're already committed to each other regardless of result. So it's like that's why it's so powerful, because it's like, because we're committed to each other, we get to experience this, and it makes it intimate and special. And my post-marriage sex understanding is so much more impactful to me than my pre-Jesus explanation of it. And that I just felt like I wanted to say that because
It's devil's avocados.
bring
If-
it.
Hold on. Do you like sex a lot? Like, do you think about it all the time? Because you brought it up like 4 times on this podcast.
It's a big part of my life.
High sex drive. That's
big
good.
part of my
Young, healthy
testimony.
man. Testosterone. Raging. Coursing.
I enjoy sex.
Natural born athlete.
All right, that's all I needed. All
Yeah.
right,
Makes sense.
it's great.
Adds
Yeah,
up. So, in this, it's probably not the perfect question. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance, but I think about people who grew up, just bought it, believed it, whatever. I know a lot of people that I went to Bible school with out in Missouri when I was in my young 20s. And these people are out here getting married at 20, 21, 19. And like,
they want to have sex.
it was hard. Yeah. Like, come on. And most of them are like getting married and then going to living in their parents' basement. It's just like, it's pretty obvious. Like, you guys just want to bang, and you feel like you just need to like have this ceremony so you can feel good about it. It's like, dude, in my mind, if you're really committed to one another and you're making that commitment, like, I don't know. It's funny to me because I'm just like, it's weird. It's like just as a natural, like biological, just a connection. It's like, because now I know a lot of these people that are either divorced, got divorced by their mid-20s because they really hadn't done their own soul searching and figuring out stuff. They just, this is what we do, this is what we believe. I want to have sex now. I guess let's do this. But then what do we do on the other end where which is unfortunate, but in the end of the day, it's like, well, at least they are on the path to really finding like their best happy life.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you have people who do that similar thing, but then because of the religious like restraints, or like probably the man-made you put in your own mind, or like maybe you're thinking of the shame if you were to like go down that road of like divorce, it's like someone that doesn't feel the freedom to really, and maybe the people aren't willing to really, really both like approach it in humility and try to work through things. You know,
So what's
I
your
guess I'm
question?
saying like some people that end up in these lifelong marriages that are kind of stale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, I made my commitment before you and God, and
Yeah.
you're just the only person I get to have sex with.
Well, I would say
Or
if
have sex with.
sex should not be your initial drive to getting married,
Right.
right?
But a lot of times it is.
Well, that's
For Christians, it is.
well, I would say that's setting you up for failure.
I know.
Mhm.
So I don't
Yeah.
I should say it like that. I don't believe it should be your drive to get married first. I think it's a dessert, like it's a little cherry on top that you get to enjoy with someone who you want to live your life with. Like
Mhm.
I married Sydney because I know I'm a better person because of her. I know together we'll create a life that is more impactful than I could do by myself. I married Sydney because she's my best friend and we have fun. I
Mhm.
married Sydney because I love her. Like I can list 50 things before sex. Sex is
Mhm.
great, but it should be used as like an additive of
Mhm.
commitment.
A lot of people like dessert first, though.
Well, it's hard. Like
It's
part of
true.
the hard thing is like,
Which leads to stomach aches.
Okay.
You know,
Yep.
a weird analogy. Fight with me
so
here.
part of the challenge is like, love that for you, and it's dope. And I hear a lot of people say that. And then I think about me, I'm 32. I've never felt that way about a girl.
Sure.
Right. So it's like, okay, so just say I just never, what happens, it's very likely I'll just never have that strong of a feeling or just really meet someone that I'm like, I need to wife it up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, all right, so I'm just going to live a life without sex if I'm going to be a Christian.
Maybe you need a husband.
Well, you can. I mean, you can do whatever
Hey.
you want.
Daddy.
This is the searching phase. This is the seeking phase. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
Like,
I think a lot
again,
of
it's not-
people get married that probably, I don't want to project on people, but it's like a lot of people, I think about in our current culture, like I'm, you know, I can only speak for myself, but I feel like just in the last couple of years, I started really asking some like serious questions about who am I?
Mhm.
Is this really the life I want to live? You know, type of a thing. Because I'm kind of in this where I'm at currently. It's like I don't really want to date the girls my mom wants me to date, and the girls that I would probably be more interested in dating. Like I don't even want to date right now because I don't even know what I like. I think when it comes to like actually like committed relationship, like you guys got to be on the same page with your belief system,
For
because
sure.
that, I think everything flows from that, your
Yeah.
values, your all that stuff.
Mhm.
So it's like, you know, I'm
So
I'm
if
not
you
really
don't know
interested.
what your belief system is right now.
yeah, how can I really?
can you
But there's
match
a
that up
lot
with
of
someone?
people that don't define that. I think
Yeah.
you know there's a scale of morality.
There's a lot of people that would be okay that you're figuring it out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, but-
whatever you do figure out, they're going to be okay with.
Well, what happens then if I figure out and I come back to Christianity and they're not down with it?
No,
But if they,
then
but
I'm
if they
now
actually
unequally yoked with
love
the
you as a
unbeliever.
person, they're going to support that belief.
Well, I agree, but then you go back to Scripture, and Scripture is like, you know, don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. It's
Well, that's why
basically
we're
saying-
doing this. We're recognizing that most Christians have an issue with judging people
Mm,
before loving people, and I think it's not your problem; it's their problem.
that's true.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where like I always fall back on the fact that God gave us free will, which is another topic we should probably talk about.
We
But-
will. We will.
Like his design for sex and marriage, like he lays out how it's supposed to be used, but still gives you the option to do what you want with it, right? And he's saying this is the intention behind it. This is how it should be used. Go make your own decisions, right? And I think that's a beautiful model of how we should act with humans. Like
Mhm.
I've experienced that what God said about sex has brought me the most fulfillment. Like I believe it to be true because I was like, you know what, God, how I've been doing it really broke my heart. I got nothing to lose. I'll see what you say about this and I'll follow it. And I did, and I experienced like there's truth in that. So I'm with it. There's a lot of people that find, you know, satisfaction in other ways. And that's okay because God gives them the ability to choose.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I hold them accountable to what I've experienced when God doesn't even do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, and one of those things too, I mean, as it relates to that whole thing, because the example with the guy at your church and stuff that was living with his girlfriend, people, we represent Jesus and the Bible and all of this as freedom, as, you know, hey, this is such a, you know, enjoy, like this joy that you're going to get from having a relationship with Jesus or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's just like, then we just kind of, you know, chain them up with all this stuff that's expected of them. It's just like, well, like you said, it should, like, it may manifest that later on. The relationship may, you know, whatever. And it's not like, it's not our job to put a timeline on that.
of course.
Right? It's like, we can't say, all right, well, you have 2 years to stop living with your girlfriend or get married. I mean, it's just like, but we try to, you know? And so
turn it into behavior modification.
For
Like,
sure.
Behavior was supposed to just be the byproduct of figuring it out. Like the main thing.
Yeah.
Like you're not
And there
supposed
is-
to be here manifesting other
Right.
people's like biblical type behavior. It's like,
mm-hmm.
but that's what I feel like we do a lot.
But there is a difference in how you approach people that identify themselves as Christians and people that don't. Right? There's a discrepancy in how, because if I'm with a friend and they're like, I'm in with this Jesus thing, I believe in it, I agree with it, and they don't live a certain way, then I'm called to be like, I'm just wondering if you're really about this, why aren't we doing it? But if it's someone who's not, like someone that just walked in the church and you're like, hey, you need to stop living with your girlfriend, I think that's totally inappropriate.
Yeah.
You can't hold other people to the
I think
standards that
part of the problem is like we pick and
right.
choose like which parts we really like to just hold people accountable for. Like the sex one is a big one that we're just like, ooh, affair, boom, roasted. But then when it comes to just like, oh, what's the I don't even know the current statistic, but the average person, like, or the average church, maybe like 15 to 20% of the believers there actually like give consistently. It's like, well, you're not living up to your end of the bargain, but we want to talk about that because we don't want to like upset people when it comes like the money, because like we need to make sure the lights stay on, kind of a thing.
Well, I mean, I would say it depends on the church. A lot of churches talk about money a lot.
And they
There
should,
are
because
a
I
lot.
think, I mean, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So money's a super important thing. And the biggest challenge is,
Sure.
it's like we watch, I don't know, man, we just, another topic for another podcast maybe is just like the American dream really doesn't line up with like the Christian life. Like the American dream is go out,
Be ambitious.
like
accumulate as much as you
accumulate
can.
wealth, so you
Yeah.
live a very comfortable, safe, peaceful life. And it's like you read the scriptures, and it's like it's pretty much the opposite of what.
No,
what
it
Jesus
takes
told us to
people
do.
away from any kind of trust in anything but themselves.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, why would that be a good thing?
So it's this challenge of our current culture where it's so deeply ingrained into people that like I want to have nice things and I want to have a big savings account so I don't have to like worry.
Yeah.
But even that, like, okay, bring it back to the scriptures. It's like the whole point of it, you know, don't worry about anything, but in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, right? And it's saying this thing, it's like we, like exactly like you said, we've become our own like God in the sense of like we just are gonna work.
We got our own safety net.
Yeah, we're gonna build a safety net.
It's like,
Yeah,
all right,
just
I've
in
got
case.
this much money in my account. I'm good. It's like, all right, now I just need this much.
It'll never end.
It never will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then all throughout Acts, you have the story of the New Testament church where everything was common among them. They didn't have savings accounts.
Yeah.
It was like, yo, you're part of this community, part of this family. And maybe that's another element where now in our current culture, you have your church friends and then you have like your work friends and then you have, you know, these different pockets where you go and exist within. But back then it's like eat, sleep, breathe. I mean, this is your tribe. You do everything together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And going back to what you said about your buddy who was, you know, a Christian, or you just the example you gave, the guy who identified as a Christian.
Right.
Even if you bring up, hey, why aren't you living your life this way? Is it your job to then go tell other people or impose consequences on him? Right? So,
Right.
like, what's the next step there?
Well, biblically, which I agree with, first you talk to him man to man.
Yeah.
Because if he's opted out, okay. But if he's still in, I just go talk to him. And if I forget where it is, but the next thing is me and another one of his trusted friends together go talk to him if nothing's changing.
Right.
the
And then
third
they
thing
take it to
is
the church.
involve. Right. So, but
So
that's
what-
only with people who I would say are committed to they want that life.
Well, I'm saying I think we have a lot of those people that
Yeah.
for one thing or another won't let go of something that is whatever prohibited or something, or and what if they have a different interpretation? Like, I mean, right? So like what if you take it to what's the next step after that? Are they kicked out of the church? Do you all of a sudden remove any Christian influence of anyone in their life?
No, I don't think that's the answer.
Right. So what is the ultimate if they just continue to, you know what I'm saying?
I would say, well, what's the example?
Because a lot of
What's
people,
the behavior?
I mean, a lot of people would just say kick them out of the church or whatever because they
Mhm.
want to protect the flock, right? And I don't know what the example is, but I guess taking that to the extreme is just how people get hurt and people.
I would say if
get scarred for their whole life because they dealt with this.
right,
You know what I mean?
yeah, no,
Because a lot of people don't go through that process you talked about.
right,
It involves their personal judgment. They'll take something to the pastor or some leader or something. They'll sit down and talk to them like, hey, you need to change, or it's like they say to like, hey, just stop attending
yeah.
without saying it.
Ooh,
You know what I mean?
I don't
Church
think
mice
that's the
love
right-
to gossip.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Runs deep.
I would say in that conversation, like if I was doing it to someone and I had to go confront them on something, if you're doing that with the posture of, hey, you need to cut this out, or then you're already wrong.
Yeah.
It's, hey, like, it would be more of like, I want to come alongside you and help you with this instead of a banishment, right? Because you're right. That doesn't
But
help
that takes
anybody.
more work and time and compassion.
Exactly.
And
that's what
most
we're called
people
to do.
don't want to do that. They want to take the easy way, and that's to call them out on social media and get them kicked out of the church.
Yeah, which is completely inappropriate and not biblical at all.
Think that happens?
It does happen
happens all
for
the
sure.
time.
No, yeah. I'm
know?
just saying it's not right, but it does happen.
Yeah, but we're actually right about an hour, so this has been great.
I enjoyed
It's
it.
been good. Yeah, so we'll get better at it. Promise. We'll get better at it.
Yeah, Corey, thanks for watching.
Man.
Yeah, thanks. We appreciate both of you. Thanks so much for tuning in. But yeah, so we'll see what the next episode's gonna be. But
Stay offended out there.
Yeah, stay
That's
offended.
Right. That's right.
I think we're gonna try to do these on a weekly basis once we get some content under our belt. So yeah, we're excited about this, and thanks for watching. Love you guys.
Peace.
Peace.